Hello, hello, and welcome to the second half of season 5. I can't believe that we're already halfway through the year. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can lead a lit up life. And with that, I want to again welcome you. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Lit Up Life with Debbie Heiser. I am Debbie Heiser, and I am here today with my good friend Chris Angell, I was talking to him before we started recording and saying how almost serendipitous this is that we are back together. Chris is actually the one that I called when I wanted to start podcasting. And he's the one that got me into podcasting and producing it and doing the whole thing. And so thank you, Chris, for that.
Cool. Look at you now.
And yeah.
Crushing it. Crushing it.
And so I want to explain a little bit more about how I know Chris. Chris actually, I don't know if you know this, Chris. I don't know if I've told you this, but you were not only the catalyst to me starting my podcast, but there was a love-hate relationship I had with you at one point in time.
I don't think I know this. Do tell.
I will. In the realm that, like, I have all these great ideas and I am air when it comes to the elements and and people should be where I'm at and they should get that I can get them here. And Chris is always like, nope. How are you going to get them from point A to point B? What's the outcomes? Where are you going to bridge them across this? And I'm like, I don't want to bridge. They just need to be there. And so the hate relationship was, I knew you were right, but I just struggled with coming up with that, right? But you were the catalyst that started me in thinking about people that I want to serve and show up to help. Where are they at in the journey? And like you started this whole hero's journey that a lot of people know. And if you don't, go look it up. But like in this hero's journey of how do I become a Yoda to somebody? Like, what is it that they're going to gain from that in the outcome? And so thank you for that, because I am where I'm at today
so cool.
Because of you. So
that's so cool.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But Chris inspires me. So I don't know if you don't follow Chris Angell, it's Angell for those of you listening on social media, and we'll find out a little bit more about how you can follow him later. But I highly suggest that you do, because one of the reasons I wanted to have Chris back on the show is because you are a no holds barred, like, I'm putting it out there and I've got a reason to put this out here. And this is how I think. You can choose to accept it or not. If you don't, move on, right? Like if you do, great, come follow. And so I want to get into that a little bit today, but I want you to introduce yourself, because I always feel like professionally, you're going to do a much better job at introducing yourself and sharing how you show up in the world. Like, what are you doing to change the world?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that, by the way. I guess I would say I'm a person who has always had a heart for other humans. Ever since I was in high school and college, I just have always felt like I want to, I've always wanted to be a leader. I've always wanted to serve people. And then I got into business at the age of 24. And I think that started like 2 decades of failing forward and just trying to find my way. And when for most of those 20 years, things just didn't feel right. I think that sums up how I got to where I am, because in all that, it's not like every moment of every day in 20 years was dark, but there's just when you're led by your soul to things and the things you do don't fully satisfy your soul, you're like, this isn't it. This isn't it. Nope. This isn't it. Like there's just so many things that aren't it. And it just is you can lose yourself in it. You just can be like, who am I anymore? And I thought this was a good idea, but is it? And, but I think the other piece of that is when you're committed to follow the breadcrumbs that your soul lays out for you. I feel like now I'm like I said before we hit record, I'm standing waist deep in my purpose and I'm loving it. And it feels so good. I'm totally lit up. But it's taken me 20 years to get here. So, just like, there you have it.
Yeah. Well, in some ways too, like I look at those following the breadcrumbs for the last 20 years that you were lit up because you were reaching, like you were stepping into it. Yeah. But because I'm a firm believer that faith means that you have a vision, you knew that you wanted to get into, and I want to dig a little deeper on what you actually do, like building these communities and collaborating and partnering with people. And you knew you wanted to get there, and you had somewhat of a vision. Maybe it wasn't super clear, but you had the faith to step forward and take the first step. And then once you take the first step, the second step appears. And so sometimes we might call it failing forward or failing, when in fact that experience led you to where you're at, right?
It's just the process. I don't know if there's any, I don't know that there's any way around it. And I think it's very common human nature to want to skip it, avoid it, find the hacks, find the shortcuts. It's why I read so many books, hired so many coaches, bought all the programs. I mean, I was constantly looking for someone to tell me, how do I get there? And it's not to say those weren't valuable for me. They gave me perspective, but I think when you're looking for your life's work, that answer only comes from within you. You know, nobody's book will ever give you the roadmap to your purpose.
Yeah. Parker Palmer, who was someone I had to read a lot of in my master's program at Gonzaga, one of my favorite quotes from him, and I use it all the time, is, "My job as a coach is to help you find your teacher within."
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because we have to find who that is. I want to step back. You said a few things as you were introducing yourself that, and as we're on this topic of kind of failing forward, when you look at, like, tell me a few of the, like, a couple of really pivotal moments for you that maybe in this context of us talking about it was a step in leading you where you're at, but that you consider that failing forward moment that you had, like these, maybe an epiphany or aha.
Yeah. My first, I got into real estate at 24 because I didn't know where I fit professionally. I wanted to be a professional friend, by the way, when I was in college.
I love that.
I'll be a professional friend. But there was no career path called professional friend. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, got into real estate, sold for 6.5 years. But the first moment that came was 6.5 years into that, I was like, I didn't love chasing paper. I didn't love transactions and escrow and 30, 45 day closings. I wanted to be with people, not contracts. So I had an opportunity to, a real estate company invited me to be their CEO, moved to Spokane, did that for 5 years. And it was a good move for me because again, it was towards leadership, right? Not a transaction. It was moving me towards being with people. So that was a good move. And that felt right. Then I did that for 5 years, and I noticed that leadership is one thing, management's a different thing. And there was a lot of inside of someone else's container, inside of somebody else's business, because it wasn't my business. There's a lot of management stuff, day-to-day operational decisions and things. And I'm like, I just got to the end of that and thinking, my life is for more than this. My life, that I was in a class, it was a heavens, clouds parting, heaven, angels singing, the whole thing. The person that was teaching the class said, you need to work less and you need to work inside your unique abilities. And time stood still for a moment. And I thought, this management thing is, I'm working more and it's pulling me outside my unique abilities. And from that moment, I was like, I'm going to transition because I feel like my life is for teaching and coaching. Within 6 months, I stepped out, started my own coaching company in 2011, and then did that for a long time. The next moment after that was probably 2018. I just realized, like, coaching real estate agents wasn't the conversation I wanted to lead in the world. Like, how you sell a house, how you do open houses, how you get a listing, how you recruit agents. Like, that was not, again, not what my life is for. Not the conversation I want to lead in the world. And so it was one more moment where I'm like, so what am I here for? And I thought, okay, I need to move my conversation of messaging, finding your truth, sharing your truth, figuring out how to say that truth in the context of marketing, so that your marketing is reaching beyond a transaction and reaching into people's hearts. Because if you're a conscious business person, there are conscious consumers looking for someone who is a lifeline spiritually to something more than what they're buying. But most people who are spiritual in nature, when they get in the context of marketing, they cut off the spiritual conversation and they only go to the product service modality. And the business person doesn't even feel in their skin about what they're saying. So I just realized, like, this was a huge missing. And I think since then, that's how I do it now kind of has shifted, but that is at the heart of what I'm doing, is helping people, helping entrepreneurs find their truth, lead their conversation in the world, and then build containers around it that support that work.
What do those containers look like, Chris?
Now they look like community. I think community for me is the most flexible container to hold all your life's work. You have a conversation to lead, find those who want to share in that conversation and invite them to meet on a weekly basis. And then you just top grade who those people are. If you really want to have impact, don't go backwards and find people that you have to bring all the way up to speed. This is almost to your point of like, you want people to float around in the air. Well, go find the ones who already have their head in the cloud, like, who are already sort of floating in that space, but don't seem to have camaraderie or community around what the thoughts they're already having.
Yeah. And it sounds like too, Chris, if I could be so bold to say that part of what you do is you partner with people to find, when I say like-minded, it doesn't mean that they're not diverse, but right, that they're like-minded, but diverse, that want to get into generative dialogue about topics and build that community. And I don't know about you, Chris, but to me, and for those of you listening or watching, to me, that feels like a really important component right now. When I think about the last 3 or 4 years, like globally, us having like something globally happen, and that caused everybody to pause, and people's sensitivity meters are higher, and also caused people to, what I've observed, move out of community, right? Based on fear. And so how have you seen that impact what you're doing?
I definitely find that those who are coming into our different communities are feeling this, it's just a tall glass of water, for people who have felt isolated. If you look at social media, there's a lot, I spend a lot of time there because my communities and people are virtual. They're not all in my local market. There's just a lot of, in cancel culture, people shouting and demanding their way is right and my narrative's right. And so there's the silent majority who I think are heart-centered, who are watching this shouting match and going like, I don't really want to play there. And because they don't feel represented and the loudest voices aren't representing them. So what ends up happening is we just isolate ourselves even more, or it's easy to start to think there's a big doom loop in society. Like things are getting worse, not better. And so when people come into a container of community where we share something in value, to your point, we're diverse, but what makes, Seth Godin always says, people like us do things like this.
Yeah.
You could change that and say, people like us talk about things like this. Generative dialogue, where it's I see a lot of people trying to, this might be a side note, but I see a lot of people trying to bridge the gap of diversity. But what they're doing, the route they're taking is trying to bring people who have different worldviews and values together. And there's such a gap that it just becomes, you're not hearing me. No, you're not hearing me. No, you're not hearing me. And now it's hard to find middle ground there. I feel like what I'm doing with community is saying, let's go find our tribe, those who share an ideology. Let's have generative conversations where we just remember what it feels like to collaborate in conversation. Let's just build that muscle memory again. As we do that, if you could call those people early adopters, socially, we're early adopters because we're choosing to come together and have generative conversations. And the bell curve of humanity is not doing that. We're choosing to spend our money and time to come together to have these generative conversations. And my vision is that when there's a million members of conscious communities having these kinds of generative conversations with each other, that to me represents an energetic tipping point that will spill out into the rest of society. So picture 1,000 communities, every community has 1,000 members, and they're having these kinds of conversations. All of a sudden now, this community can talk to this diverse community because there's something that we figured out about how generative dialogue works.
Yeah.
Now we can actually bridge a gap, but you try to rush that. You try to bridge diversity too soon, and it's just people digging their heels in to be right about their narrative.
Yeah. And Chris, to me, like hearing you say this, it is about collaboration. It is about generative conversation, but also what happens within generative conversation is the dialogue, but also the listening. Because what I found is that even if you're at so for those of you that don't know the 4 levels of listening, Google it, it works. But like the 4th level is where I'm just open to hearing, and I'm so present with you. That's part of why I love recording podcasts, because I'm so present in the moment and picking up on things that we're saying.
Yeah.
Versus level 2 is me trying to tell you my thing, and it needs to be right. Level 1 is it is this way, period.
Yeah.
And level 3 is like, I'm a little open, but I'm still got my agenda. And what I hear you doing is trying to increase that muscle, because it's a learned skill to listen well without judgment.
Yep.
And be able to create conversation, which I tend to agree with you. I feel like a lot of people, and not to get into the gloom and doom, but a lot of people have forgotten how to do that. We're on this like polarity of things that it's hard to find any kind of middle ground. And so how awesome is that it feels like you're finding something that there's a commonality in there, that there still may be beliefs that are on polar opposites, but teaching that skill.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
So tell me how you've seen that impact, like the people that have been involved in it. How has that impacted them?
I mean, I think it just comes from people feeling seen. If you don't feel and heard, if you don't feel seen and heard, you tend not to show up to your life's work. I mean, so much of my community called Gonzaga University, which is for leaders and community builders, where the conversations we're having are wrestling with our own questions and limiting beliefs, like let's challenge our own status quo. And a lot of that is vulnerable conversation. And as we've been meeting for 1.5 years. So as we continue to, we're right now, we're in a series called The Vortex of Vision. And we're just dismantling our cultural definitions of vision. Most vision tends to be around income, lifestyle, and success. So we set a vision board to have this much money and this kind of a boat and this kind of a house. And all of those things are about me, about the individual, not about a vision for the planet or a vision even beyond my lifetime. We're out of practice having vision for something beyond our own lack. I don't have money, so I have a vision for money. I don't have the kind of lifestyle I want, so I have a vision for a lifestyle I want. So we need to practice getting outside of that. So like, for example, in this series, that's what we're doing. And people are now, by the way, these are super smart people, and they're very deep spiritual people. And they are starting to notice where they've put lids on their vision. And that's the thing. The thing about that is that's the human condition. Like, we all do that. I just don't think we realize we do it. And it's in these kinds of Socratic conversations, you can call them heuristic conversations, where we're wrestling through something that you start to get honest about the things that have been limiting your potential and who you really are and what you really want to do. And so the fruit of these conversations are people are not only wrestling with it, but starting to make headway in the real work. The real work that they want to do with their life.
So cool. That like just gives me tingles, because that's the kind of stuff I love. Right. So it's interesting as you tell me that, because someone I've been following fairly recently is Peter Crone. Excuse me. He's a coach out of the UK and now in California. And one of the things that he says is, have you ever noticed that, and when you talked about like success in this like cultural framework that we're in, particularly in the Western world, is that when people define success, now don't get me wrong, when you said vision board, I looked up because I have like 5 vision boards in front of me.
I have vision boards too. So
right. Well, and like, it's interesting though, because I was thinking, isn't it interesting how my vision boards have shifted from things to more of like, listen, celebrate, like more of like, characteristic driven, I guess, is where I'm going. But what he says is that it's so interesting how most of us in the Western world define success as something we don't think we have. When in fact, let's say physical health, right? Like, I want to be healthy, and part of that is shedding a certain amount of weight, eating nutritious food, blah, blah, blah. And I use physical because everybody has something physically, right, that they look at. And it's like I'm searching and grasping, right? And even when you grasp, it's so constrictive. I'm grasping at something versus I already have some. right? Like it's the whole gap in the gain mentality, but like I already have some health. I already am physically active with skiing. I am already those things that then raise our vibration to want more.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of what I hear you saying too, is like helping to like dig in and wrestle and have psychological safety with other people to continue to raise our vibration, which is this whole groundswell. I love how this is coming around, like the whole groundswell for you of creating this like movement.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's the, I've quoted Ram Dass so many times in the last year. He has a saying that says we're all just walking each other home. And the idea that in these communities, that community is a perfect place to walk each other home. You don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And to think otherwise is naive. Like nobody has all the answers. And it's when I just made a post the other day about like, when you're ready to stop listening to the quote unquote experts, because you're ready to listen to yourself, right? Like that's what community is for. Like community isn't because they have your answer, which by the way, I think is a lot of how people find justification to pay for a membership to a community. Oh, if I go there, I'll get an opportunity. I'll get a lead. I'll get their answers. We're trying to constantly hack other people's information. But if you flip that and you say, look, what I'm here for is my own truth. And I'm investing in this community because it reflects back to me the things I know to be true. Or it confirms in me the hunches that I've had about what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
That's how we walk each other home.
That's so good, Chris. And I look at it and, you and I both have like this heart connection of kind of changing the world in a different way than others. Cause like it drives me nuts, my industry of coaching, where it is like, follow my 7-step thing and you're going to be blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I mean, there is action that has to take place, right? And there are some methodologies out there that work, but not for everyone. And that's what I've found too. Like, even as I've been parts of coaching programs and been a participant, like these one-stop shop models, it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when I look at it too, it's so like critical to find that teacher within and then have kind of that person to help you guide you through, whether it be a community or one-on-one or whatever, right? Like guiding you through to help support you as you continue to figure it out. Right. And that's part of what I hear you doing. And it's so beautiful. I love it.
It feels that way to me because it's so different than how I've done it in the past. Because I really did look to how others are doing it. Oh, I need to have a lead magnet. I need to have a free thing they give me their email address for. I need to front and posture and puff to look bigger than I am. And there's all this stuff. And I'm just like, finally, I'm like, look, I'm going to stand on my truth. And if you can't hear it, if it doesn't resonate with you, then it's not for you. But what I also know, having posted for years and years on social now this way, is that there are plenty who do resonate with it. And those are the people that I then build relationship with. And it's magical.
Yeah, it totally is. And, part of what I love about that, Chris, is that I'm a firm believer too, in like getting really clear on who you are and who you want to be in the world, how you want to show up in the world, right? Which is part of where I feel like I'm a little different in coaching because I focus on that. And then it's okay. Part of that is a business, part of that is financial, but part of that is your contribution to community, all of those things. And when I look at it, I don't know, it just reminds me that we are all in this together. And what I find, to your point, is that there are certain people that resonate with it. And I'm a firm believer too, that like this whole puffing, like I hear you so much, because I was talking to someone else not long ago about marketing and looking at like, okay, how can I do this? And they're like, oh, well, you need a lead magnet. And I go, no, I want to do it different than other people. Right. So it's about having like conversations, and not that money is the whole thing, but sometimes I work with business owners, right? And so part of it is they want financial freedom. And so when I look at that, I tell people, you know what? You rarely see me post on Facebook. Right, on Instagram. I mean, I post some personal things and I have a business page that I share the podcast on, but otherwise I'm not doing a lot of that. And I've built my business financially from 30 some odd thousand my first year to multiple six figures. And I've done it without feeling this pressure of going out to post. So to your point, like you can, like the world that we're in, each of us is on our own unique journey. We can learn from others, right? And take what we like and leave the rest. And sometimes I think it takes people like you and I and people within these communities to also say, hey, you trust yourself. You've got to figure this out. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And also, I don't know, you tell me, but within these groups, and I know I've been to a couple of them, like part of it is too knowing yourself well enough to know what you need to be able to ask of your peers to say, I want to get into a dialogue about this.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is huge. I mean, and self-awareness from a place that's willing to ask for that help or that perspective, right? Because you can be self-aware, but then you show up with others and you don't want to look like the fool, so you don't share, and now you're, you know what I mean, like that. I think that's the power of vulnerability, transparency, and sharing that way is one, it gives others permission to not be perfect. I mean, another post I made the other day was looking at just the fact that what I trust is vulnerability. I trust vulnerability. I don't trust how many stages you've spoken on, how many books you've written, how big your bank account is. I don't trust your case studies. I don't trust your perfect selfie. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things I now, in some ways, even make me distrust you. You come at me too polished, and I'm like, nobody's this polished. I trust vulnerability. I trust people who've done their spiritual work, their personal work, their shadow work.
Yeah.
And so when you have the self-awareness of the questions you have, the frustrations of things, and then you are willing to bring that to others from a place of strength, not from a place of poor me, from a place of I'm standing in my what I know and don't know, and nobody knows it all.
Yeah.
You invite a richer conversation. You invite a better answer, a better perspective. And I just think that that's a really good posture for people to collaborate in, to partner together. If all we're doing in society is collaborating, together as human beings, a better posture to do that from would be like, here's what I'm learning, here's where I'm struggling, and it gives others permission to say, oh, that's what I was gonna say about that was in that post. I feel like we are operating in a market, a free market, a market of masks. Like what everybody does is we show up with our mask on, and that's everybody in the market because we're too afraid to look like a fool.
Yeah. Well, and part of what I love about what you're doing, and so I want to, as we wrap it up, also ask you where people can find you, because part of what I love about what you do is you are inviting people to step into a room where they're not the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
In a way, right? Like we're just all going to show up with the expectation that we're not the smartest person in the room, so we can let our big ego, like not that ego's bad, but like put that to the side and drop from our head into our hearts, into our bodies, and into our intuition to have this dialogue and practice these skills. So Chris, thank you for everything that you do in the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been fun to see the groundswell actually like create and morph, and like it's, I think of a drop, right? Like, and how it's like going outwards. So that's fun to see. And so Chris, if somebody's interested in finding out more about how they can be part of Groundswell University and or maybe start a group of their own from a collaborative approach, where would they find you to learn more about that and chat with you about it?
Yeah, the easiest way to learn about Groundswell University is mygroundswell.com/university. So MY as in my groundswell.com, mygroundswell.com/university. Okay, there's a video there that explains sort of what Groundswell University is, community, etc. And then if you just want to sort of like troll my feed for a bit, kind of figure out like, who am I? Is this guy worth my time or anything? You can always just go to facebook.com/Chris.Angell with 2 L's. All my posts are public, right? There's like, we don't have to be friends for you to look at my posts. You don't have to friend request me, but you can if you want. And that would be a good place just to kind of see my content and where I'm coming from. So.
Perfect. And Chris, we'll put the Groundswell University link in the show notes so that if anybody wants to find that, they can. And Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you so very much. I so appreciate your time, and it's always so wonderful to
It's
catch up with you.
seriously, I wish we were a little bit closer, Sam, like 2 hours away, but we'd be hanging out all the
know.
time. So
I know, that's so true. And for those of you listening, if you would like to have a conversation with me about gaining some clarity on how you can lead your lit up life, please go out to www.leadyourlituplife.com and set up a clarity call with me. It's a no pressure time to just spend 30 minutes and get really clear about things. So with that, everyone have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.